Hare Krishna, and a very warm welcome to this evening's program of Gita Week. And we've thus far been very pleased to see many of you returning every evening to join us here on this very auspicious week in anticipation of the most auspicious day of the calendar, which is Sri Krishna Janmashtami, which is next week, Wednesday, and building up to that climatic special day of the year. We've been reading from Bhagavad Gita every evening. We've had very wonderful speakers that have joined us, and we're very honored to have such guests in our midst. Tonight, we have a very, very special guest, and that is Grace Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who's joining us all the way from Gainesville, Florida, and you'll see him waving to us, and shortly he will be online with us. I'm not sure if, perhaps I'm just going to check in with Prabhu and see if he's ready to commence, because I know I caught him out of breath a few moments ago, but I guess he's ready. Okay, so I want to begin by just setting the tone for tonight's presentation. But before I do that, I would just like to remind everyone that we do have a provision for question and answers, which is the last 15 minutes of the session between 8:15 to 8:30. Brahmatirtha Prabhu will address us, and in the meantime, whilst listening into his class, perhaps if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take those questions and I will present it to him a bit later in tonight's program. Likewise, please, we encourage you to listen in attentively, because there will be a giveaway. As you've been noticing over the past few nights, we've been giving away copies of the Bhagavad Gita. So you'll stand yourself a chance of winning such a copy. Should you get the answer right to a question that we will pose based on what we hear from Prabhu tonight, and we will formulate that question and ask you that question during the question and answer session, and we invite you at that stage to give us your answer. Without further ado, I would like to start off by introducing Brahmatirtha Prabhu. He was born in Newark, in New Jersey in 1949. He completed his BS, which is, I'm assuming, is a Bachelor of Science, Prabhu, in as it's referred to in the United States of America. So he did his BSc in chemistry at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1971, and received his MS, which is the Master in Science in Geology, from Rutgers University in 1975. After a 20-year career serving as a geologist and vice president of a large regional environmental company, he currently works as an environmental consultant to state governments. He has been a member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute since the inception in 1976, giving a presentation at their first international conference in Life Comes from Life in 1977, and working on a multitude of projects with R.L. Thompson, who is also known as Sadaputta, from 1995 through to 2008. I think more interestingly and more recently, he's very much involved as being a mediator. He is a court-certified mediator. He now serves as the director of Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies and co-director of ISKCON Resolve, who many of you might know is that arm of ISKCON which assists devotees in trying to resolve any issues through mediation. Brahmatirtha Prabhu's conversation with Srila Prabhupada has become memorialized in the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. This particular book, which I'm sure many of you have had the privilege of reading over the years, particularly, I know it's one of those books where every simple question that could have been asked and probably has been on your mind, was posed by Prabhu to Srila Prabhupada, and we've had the perfect questions, the perfect answers to that. So this particular book has been described as a transcript of what has been a life-transforming meeting between Srila Prabhupada and Brahmatirtha Prabhu in 1972 in Mayapur. So having introduced Brahmatirtha Prabhu, I want to say to him, we are extremely privileged to have you here with us in South Africa and streaming live on Facebook all over the world as well. And we invite everyone to join us and to take great advantage of this opportunity to hear from Prabhu as he speaks to us on a verse from Bhagavad Gita. So Hare Krishna Prabhu, and welcome to this Gita Week program. Thank you for joining us.
It's a real privilege to be here, especially with Champakalata when she had the most thankless service in ISKCON. running the Child Protection Office. We got to work together, and I got to really appreciate her intelligence, fairness, and calmness in the face of the most impossible service to do in ISKCON. I have I've never been to South Africa, but I have great appreciation. I've met with many devotees from there. The late Bhakti Swami shared with me some of his amazing adventures there, and of course, I was friends and associated for various projects with Bhakti Swami, and like many of you, I'm still in my state of shock and tears trying to wrap my arms around it. I'm going to tell you some adventures that may be of interest. I am perfectly fine while I'm speaking if you send things into the chat window. I have the chat window open. If you see me looking away, I have some notes on my second screen, so I'm paying attention, but I do have a two-screen system. And I'm glad to take any questions. But first, I have to offer respects. Om Jnana Timesa Jnana Jnana Chakshum Vijnana Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And I have no idea how many people are on here. There are 39 on Zoom and whatever number on Facebook. I assume if people on Facebook have questions, they'll send it to Champakalata and you'll send it to me. Is that correct?
Um,
Or should I open the Facebook window and have it on my computer?
Not to worry, Prabhu. We are monitoring that. We have a tech team who's supporting this entire Zoom meeting as well as the Facebook Live. So we will gather the questions and we will definitely pose it to you. So you have the next 40 or 45 minutes, should I say, to present the class, and then we'll take the questions towards the end of it, if it suits you that way.
I will do everything I can not to bore you.
I'm sure you wouldn't.
And I am opening that window so I can see chats coming in. Okay, so I can see chats coming in. Okay, I got that window open too. Boy, I look weird on there. Okay. Yeah, thanks. You want to come say hello? Well, my wife brought me my cup of tea. You must have a cup of tea for these things. Hare Krishna. I've been a devotee for a half a century, and I have to admit, I have not had one boring day. It's never a boring moment, actually. I'm going to show you do I have permission to screen share?
You've been made a co-host, Prabhu, so you will be able to screen share.
Oh, a host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, so somebody can correct that. We can go on.
Okay, I think that's been done now, Prabhu, if you want to use that facility.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, we got it now here. Okay, I'm going to share this. This is a picture from when 1977, 5 years after I met Prabhupada. So everyone has to guess which one's me in the changing body exhibit we have here. That was my youthful body. I don't have that same one anymore. So you have to guess which one's me. Some guess the guy on the left. Some say the guy in the lower right, but most of you will guess it's me in the middle. And that was in 1977, and it was the first international conference of Life Comes from Life, held in the courtyard of the Gurukula in Vrindavan. Prabhupada was there. He couldn't attend the conference. It was a month before he left us, and he was quite ill at that time. But every night he would call us into his room, and he would say, "What are your Sankirtan scores?" Now, how do we present Sankirtan scores as a bunch of nerdy scientists? He wanted to know what arguments we gave, and we had some very top scholars were there visiting us, what arguments they gave, and wanted us to compare arguments. And so we'd walk into Prabhupada's room, and he was in his bed. It was a darkened room because he was eyesight at such that any light would be painful because he would reach that condition. And so he'd ask us what were their arguments, and we'd present it to them. And what were your arguments? And he wanted to see if we could argue the philosophy properly. And he was quite pleased by the answers. Most of the answers, I was more the observer. I was too shy to say much. But Srup Damodar Maharaj did a lot of the speaking. So, now, I was asked to speak on something from the Gita and something personal and something about Prabhupada. I am assuming that a large part of this audience is familiar with India or maybe even from India. Now, in 1968, I heard Jayadvaita Swami and others chanting in Greenwich Village in New York, and I was fascinated. I was spellbound by what they were doing, but I didn't quite know what it was. So I went and learned the mantra that they were chanting. It took me a while to figure it out. I learned the mantra, and then I finally found the Hare Krishna temple. They just moved from 26 Second Avenue, and at that point in time, the forwarding address sign, "We have moved to here," had not yet been invented in ISKCON, so I couldn't find them. So it took me about a year to find where they moved. Finally, I found them, went into the temple, and I said, this will tell me what this whole thing is about. Is this some kind of weird cult? Because in that time in India, shortly after Prabhupada came, a lot of so-called gurus started coming from India, mostly espousing Mayavadi philosophy. You are God, I am God, we're all God. And some of them were really weirdos. And so I wanted to know, was the Krishna movement one of these weirdos, or was it something different? And the mantra struck me, but when I went to the temple, my first impression was, oh my God, these are the weirdos. I mean, the way everyone dressed and talked and everything, it left me with, you might say, less than a completely favorable impression. I said, okay, be that as it may. And then I was in college and I read a few editions of the Gita. Prabhupada's wasn't out yet. And I was fascinated by the Gita. It just fascinated me. And I made a decision that I'm going to have to go to India to sort this out, to see who are the real yogis and who are the phonies. If I don't go to India, I won't know. By the way, any of you who'd like to turn on your cameras, feel free to, because I like seeing who I'm speaking to. You don't have to. But if you'd like to turn on your cameras, feel free to. It's always nice to see who I'm talking to. And if I tell a joke and they laugh, I know it worked. Okay. But nobody has to. So, and by the way, can you all hear me okay? I have a new microphone set up. Thanks to, for all the sadness of COVID, I've never given more classes or heard more classes. So everything has a silver lining, though COVID right now is a lot of sadness for all of us. So I decided maybe I should go to India. So I applied to the American Peace Corps, which is a program where if you get accepted, it was hard to get into. We're sent overseas, we learn a language, hum kuch Hindi janta hai. We learn a language and we go to another country and help out. And, most of us are in our 20s, kind of stupid to think that we can go to a foreign country and figure out what's going on. I figured that out right away in the program, but it's a good cultural exchange. So I applied to the Peace Corps, and right before I graduated college, I was accepted. And I had asked for India, and that was the only country I would consider going to. And I didn't know India was considered one of the worst assignments in all of the Peace Corps. They were all over the world in 70 countries, but India was quite austere then. And so I was assigned to India. So there I was on the way to India. And our pay was only a few hundred rupees a month. And we lived according to the, I was assigned to a high school in the most progressive, modern, least political, least caste conscious, well functioning state in all of India. That was Bihar. And for those of you who know India, you know that was a joke I just said. Because it was, I hope there's no Biharis I'm insulting here. I don't mean to. But nevertheless, the Krishna gave me the right place, gave me the most remote assignment in the Peace Corps was generally Bihar. And the most remote place in Bihar was Chaibasa, where I was assigned. But it was only an hour, only an overnight train ride from Calcutta. So I went to Calcutta. I would go to Calcutta on occasion, visit the big city, you know, if it was only a few rupees to take an unreserved overnight train. And while I was in Calcutta, I saw a sign, Hare Krishna Festival. So I said, this is interesting. I'm going to find out if the Christians are legitimate or not. Because I'd been in India maybe 6 months, and I would ask people, are Hare Krishnas legitimate, or are they some weird cult? And I couldn't get any straight answers. And I even went to the University of Kurukshetra. I happened to be in that area. And I went to the student union, and they surrounded me, all the students. It's rare to see a Westerner there. And I said, well, tell me about Krishna. And they said, Krishna, we want to talk about Nixon. It was right before a Pakistani war. So I said, okay, that didn't work. So then I was in Calcutta, and I saw this sign, Hare Krishna Festival. I said, I'm going. And I went to this festival in a very fancy part of Calcutta. And who was speaking there? Giriraj Brahmachari. And now, of course, Giriraj Swami. And he gave a talk that was so absolutely brilliant that I can still remember it, you know, a half a century later. And that talk changed my life in many ways. He was wearing the traditional Bengali dress, and it was a fancy part of Calcutta, so they were all wearing traditional Western dress, suits and ties. And he said, you are all looking to the West to chase after the wealth we have. I come from a very wealthy family, and I gave it all up to live a very simple monk life in India. Then he said, why in the world would I do that? And he paused, and the whole audience was kind of astounded because they said, why would he do it? He's from a rich family in America, has everything he wants, and he gave it up to live like a monk in India? And then he gave the answer, because I found the higher taste. And he said it with such conviction that I believed him. And after that, I said, now I got to learn a little more about this. So I went to I started when I could get away from my teaching assignment, going into Calcutta for the weekend and staying at a youth hostel and visiting the temple. And one time I was there was Prabhupada there, November 1971. So I walked in the room and I said, and I got introduced to Prabhupada and I sat there, and Prabhupada asked me, "So, you have any questions?" So I asked my first stupid question. This one's really stupid. Later on, I asked better questions by the mercy of Prabhupada, but this one was not perfect. I said to Prabhupada, "Well, Prabhupada, you're following the Hindu path. Why not the Buddhist path?" I'd just been to Bodh Gaya where the Buddha got enlightenment and all of that. So, and I had read several books on Buddhism. I said, "Why not Buddhism?" So Prabhupada gave the typical answer he'd give when asked that question. Think for a moment how you might answer that question. If I said to you, "Why not?" Somebody walks up to you, you're following a Hindu tradition or a Vaishnava tradition. Why not a Buddhist tradition? Think for a moment how you would answer that. Now I'll tell you how Prabhupada answered it. Prabhupada said, "Oh, I see a Raghunath there. Raghunath, young boy, how would you answer that question?" You want to unmute and answer that? Oh, I'm putting him on the spot. Okay, I won't put you. Oh, yes, how would you answer that question?
I'm not really sure about that.
That's a good answer. It was a lot better. That's actually a good answer. It's very similar to Prabhupada's answer. Okay, you can mute now. I'll go back and tell you the answer. But thank you. Prabhupada turned to me and asked me a question. So what does the Buddha say? Prabhupada wasn't going to represent Buddhist philosophy to me. He wanted to talk philosophy, not isms, Buddhism, Hinduism, not this or that ism. He would talk philosophy. So he said, "Well, what does the Buddha say?" And then he discussed it with me philosophically. And I said, "Well, there's a eightfold path and four noble truths, or was it eight noble truths and fourfold paths?" Or I kept going around in circles. I finally said to him, "Prabhupada, I have no idea what the Buddha says." He says to me, "Then why are you asking?" Because he wanted to discuss philosophy. He wasn't interested in discussing this ism or that ism. So after that, I decided I'm going to shut up, keep my mouth closed tight, and listen. Meanwhile, in the back of the room, two devotees were having a big argument. It was a big room. It's still there in Calcutta. And they were having an argument. And that bewildered me. Because the devotees had told me that Prabhupada was a pure devotee and he, well connected with Krishna and knows the absolute truth, etc. So I was thinking, why would two people be arguing? They could just go ask Prabhupada and he'll tell them the answer. That bewildered me. Later on, I found out the answer. One of them was a sannyas about to leave his ashram, and he was having quite a bit of spiritual trouble. The other one was trying to convince him to do something different. Prabhupada knew from looking at his face that he was going to leave. And Prabhupada had the wisdom that if I tell him, give him an instruction, and he doesn't follow it, then he'll be committing two offenses. One, breaking his vows, and two, not following my instruction. So then Prabhupada had the wisdom, just let it be. As the Beatles song says, let it be, there will be an answer. And Prabhupada let them go. And I understood later on when I reflect on that, I thought how wise Prabhupada was. So then fast forward a little bit, I was in Calcutta again in February of 1972, and I ran into a devotee, and he said, "We just bought a piece of land north of Calcutta in Mayapur." I didn't know what a Mayapur was. And he said, "We're doing food relief for the Bangladesh refugees because India, Pakistan had one of their many wars, and there were thousands and tens of thousands of refugees that were hungry." So I said, "This sounds like a good thing for me to do." So I went, devotee told me how to get there, and I took a train up to Navadvip. and took a rickshaw, crossed the river, and then devotee Tejas saw me, and I was the only Westerner there that wasn't a devotee. There were 70 devotees there. And he said to me, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm a Peace Corps worker." He goes, "I used to be in the Peace Corps." He was in Andhra Pradesh. So we immediately hit it off, became friends, as we still are. And he turns to me and goes, "Would you like to meet Prabhupada?" And I was a little hesitant because I was really felt I was pretty foolish when I met Prabhupada the prior time. And so I didn't want to be a fool again. But then he said, "You ought to." I said, "Okay." So I walked in to meet Prabhupada. The first part of our conversation was not recorded because the secretary didn't realize it was going to be interesting. I wish it had been. And Prabhupada greeted me and asked what I'm doing. I told him. And I was a rare person to visit. In India, you had people my age, Westerners. You had one category. There were hippies, and the other category were hippies. It's very rare to find an educated Westerner in India, especially working as a teacher. It was rare. So Prabhupada took some interest and said, "Do I have any questions?" So what I did is I followed a formula from the Gita. And the formula from the Gita is very simple. The Gita says, just approach a spiritual master and inquire submissively and render service. And the spiritual master can give you the truth, the tattva. And just approach a spiritual master, inquire submissively. So I did that. When I saw Prabhupada, I said, "Look, I'm not going to be foolish like I was last time, asking kind of irrelevant questions." I said, "I'm going to assume that he knows the absolute truth. I went to India trying to find out the truth. So I'm just going to go and ask Prabhupada, just listen to him." And so I went in with the right attitude. I was submissive. I was listening carefully. And the second thing was I was rendering service because I was serving out prasadam to the refugees when I wasn't with Prabhupada. I accidentally hit the formula from the 4th chapter of the Gita, approach of spiritual master, inquire submissively, render service. And there were 70 devotees in Mayapur, all of them under 30, most under 25. And there was one guest. And 70 young, zealous devotees and one guest can be quite scary. So I'm convinced Prabhupada kept me in his Bhajan Kutir, which is still there, his little meditation hut. I'll show you. And that was the only building in Mayapur. There was nothing else. So for 3 days, Prabhupada kept me in there with him all day. And I would be asking him questions and he'd be answering it and having a good time about it. And so that's kind of my story of how I met Prabhupada and how this book, which is in, oddly enough for me, in 40 some odd languages, how that happened. Now, I'll tell you a mystical story because devotees love mystical stories, and this will take us to our Gita verse of the day. When I was in college, I read the Gita. It was Radhakrishnan, Dr. Radhakrishnan's Gita I had read. When I read it, and I came across this verse, Apichet sudacharo bhajate mam anya bhak sudhira eva svam Mantavas samyag vasito hisa, even if one commits a most abominable action, if he's engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. And when I read when I read that in college, and I didn't know any Sanskrit. I didn't read a version that had Sanskrit. That was just an English translation of Radhakrishna's Gita. I mean, his English translation. That verse struck in my mind because I was uh, uh, a digital thinker. It's either yes or no. In the East, China and India, people are not digital thinkers. The word and is very common. When various invaders would come to India, people think, oh, I can learn from them. In the famous book, The Wonder That Was India by Balsham, he talks about how in India there were rarely any religious wars. Nowadays, of course, things are a little different with India, Pakistan, but at that time, in times before the modern times, if an invader would come to India, people would want to learn from them. They use the word and. It wasn't you're a Christian or you're a Muslim. You're a Jew or a Hindu. They didn't separate things like that so much. So when I read this verse, it really mystified me. And I asked the professor, can you explain this to me? And he said, no, I don't really get it. He didn't understand it. So I'm going to read a little bit from the purport. The word Sudartro used in this verse is very significant, and we should understand it properly. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. One is conditional, and the other is constitutional. And then skip on. Besides these, the living entity who is fully conscious of his spiritual nature and engaged in Krishna consciousness is transcendental. Now, in the conditioned state, sometimes devotional service and conditional service in relation to body will parallel one another. And sometimes they be opposed to one another. So Prabhupada cautions, a devotee is cautious that he does not do anything to disrupt his wholesome condition. But sometimes that happens. So Prabhupada says, sometimes it may seem that a person in Krishna consciousness can commit some act which may be taken as abominable, either socially or politically. But such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in service, the Lord, being situated within his heart, purifies him and excuses him from the abomination. So this verse, so no one should deride a devotee for some accidental fall down. But Prabhupada further on cautions devotees should not use this as an excuse to plan a fall down. And Prabhupada says, as long as one is not strong enough to fight the illusory energy, there may be accidental fall downs, but one is strong enough, he is no longer subject to such fall downs. No one, that's you, me, and all of us, should take advantage of this verse and commit nonsense and think he's still a devotee. If he does not improve in his character by devotional service, it's understood that he's not a high devotee. So that verse was the one that bewildered me. So I'm meeting with Prabhupada. Remember, I know a little Hindi. I know zero Sanskrit. Never seen anything to do with Sanskrit in my life. So the very first verse Prabhupada quotes to me while we're talking in the Bhajan Kutir, his hut, is Apichet Sudarcharo Bhajate Mam Anya Bhak. He quotes that very verse. And not only does he quote that verse, then Prabhupada says to me the most amazing things. And he says to me, have you read it? In other words, Prabhupada knew I knew that verse, though Prabhupada knew I didn't know any Sanskrit. And he knew I knew that verse. That was quite mystical to me. The only verse, the whole Gita I know, was the first one Prabhupada quoted to me. And curiously enough, it was the last one Prabhupada quoted to me at the end of our conversations. Now, that is quite a mystical adventure. So I thought I would share with all of you in South Africa my little mystical adventure with Prabhupada. So I know that many of you have read Perfect Questions. I was asked to speak how did the book happen. So I wanted to kind of tell this story of how it happened. I end up meeting Prabhupada. And then after I met Prabhupada, after he spoke to me for about a day and a half, 2 days, I got a little nervous. And devotees, and the Gaur Purnima night, this was during the Gaur Purnima time, there were no electricity other than a small generator for the pandal. There was no buildings in Mayapur. There was no shops. There was nothing to buy. It was just a rice paddy converted into a men's tent, women's tent, a pandal tent, and a little hut for Prabhupada. That was it. So the wonderful Yamuna, who some of you know, the late Yamuna, she every morning she sings Govinda Mari Pursham as we open the altar in every ISKCON temple around the world. The wonderful Yamuna came up to me and she said to me, Brahma, you are so lucky, or Bob, I was Bob then, you are so lucky, lucky, lucky. Prabhupada doesn't spend so much time anymore with people. When the movement was new, Prabhupada spent so much time, but by then there were thousands of devotees, a few hundred temples. He said, and Prabhupada's giving you all this time. Of course, I was the only guest there, so I was very lucky. So she was saying how lucky I am. And she offered me so much love that I got very scared because I was just thinking, this is all theoretical. I mean, I'm asking questions, he's answering, but later on I'll contemplate all this and see what it means. It doesn't mean I have to be a devotee. And when she talked to me with such love in her heart that I actually went behind the pandal and started crying, which is not normally what I do. I said, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? So the next morning, Prabhupada called me into his Bhajan Kutir, and I said to him, thank you so much. Tomorrow I have to leave. And I said to Prabhupada, I have to leave tomorrow, go back to my teaching. And Prabhupada said the amazing words to me. He said, don't talk L-E-A-V-E, talk L-I-V-E. Don't talk leave, talk live. And I said, I cannot yet. I have to return to my town. Prabhupada goes, don't return. Softly but firmly. I should stay here? Stay here. If you tell me to, I'll stay. And then he said to me, good boy. Just like if you have a pet dog, you go, good boy. At that moment, I knew I was Prabhupada's dog. And then he talked to me about how to really get the essence of Krishna consciousness and what it takes. And the vision of a devotee, how the devotees see the world. And then that was it. So I'm going to pause here for questions now. I wanted to speak about 9:30. I'll say a few more words about 9:30. It's not the most important verse in the Gita for many of us, but for me, somehow it became a very important verse because somehow it stuck with me when I was in college, and then Prabhupada used that verse to rope me in. What the Gita says, though, in 9:30 has a major impact on my own personal service. I do the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and I also co-director of ISKCON Resolve, the conflict resolution arm. I've gone through extensive training to work in conflict resolution at ISKCON because I felt in ISKCON one of the shortcomings we have is we all sometimes just don't get along with each other very well. And Prabhupada said that the only enemy we have is ourselves. There is no other enemy that can hurt our movement. And this verse is very important that way because as devotees, every one of us, or aspiring devotees, is going to have ups and downs. And when we have our downs in devotional service, if we have loving relationships that help lift us up, then we survive. And we have our ups if people appreciate, wow, I loved your class, I love what you're doing, and we're grateful, then the whole movement will succeed. And if we start criticizing, oh, that person is not following as strictly as I am. And pride enters. There's a saying, pride comes before the fall. And it's that pride that takes things away. I'll tell you a quick story on pride, and then we'll get to questions. I think I'm just exactly on time. Um, After I went back to America, I was engaged before I went to India. So my poor fiance, when I came home, there I am mumbling on beads and hanging out with people wearing bed sheets, or that's how she saw it. Of course, eventually she became a wonderful devotee, Bhakti Devi, and um, has her niche in service of as a marriage and family therapist. But at that time, I came back, but we're still going to get married, and things were. But I wanted to wait until she understood Christian consciousness on her own. It's not very good idea for any spouse to try to preach to their own spouse what they must do. Um, Marriage is an arrangement. It's a voluntary arrangement, and devotional service is voluntary. You can't force someone into it. There's a saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That applies very strongly for devotional service. It has to be a change in heart. So I knew her heart was very good, and I'd wait a little bit. So usually in those days, you got initiated in 6 months, especially if Prabhupada personally preached to you. So it was already 2 years later, I was in grad school and not initiated yet. I was waiting for the right time, maybe a year and a half, 2 years later. And I was chanting 16 rounds following. I mean, there was no issues that way. But some devotees, very young, immature, were preaching very heavy to me, very, very heavy. Oh, you must surrender. You got to get initiated. You should give up your wife if she's not ready. You should do this. You should do that. And after all, some devotees, such as Gopal Krishna Maharaj, who was Grahasta, and others, were really so kind and affectionate to me. But some others were pretty harsh. Young and immature is how I put it. So I was feeling pretty down on myself. I was feeling, God, I'm pretty fallen. Prabhupada gave me all this mercy. I'm not initiated yet. So Prabhupada was visiting the old Henry Street Temple in New York, and I was there to hear his class. And I was still in graduate school, and Prabhupada was about to walk around the corner to temple room. So I immediately offered obeisance before he came around the corner. And I put my head deep into the wall and said the prayer slow so Prabhupada wouldn't have to see my face, because my face wasn't worth seeing. I was pretty depressed about it, as you can see. So Prabhupada, I assume Prabhupada and his entourage had walked past me, because I just said the prayer is very slow, kind of up tight against the wall. Prabhupada saw me somehow, even though my face was on the ground. And he stood there and stood there and stood there until I finished the prayer. And then when I stood up, Prabhupada turned to me and said, "So glad to see you," and gave me a hug. Now, Prabhupada wasn't usually a hugger. So that was quite a momentous moment. And I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't even believe it happened until another devotee came up to me and said, "Do you see what happened to you?" I said, "Did that really happen?" So then that happened another one or two times. There were events like that. And finally, in 1976, after the New York Rath Yatra, I'm getting initiated. And I go up to get my cookie at the Guru Puja. And I walk up very proud. Oh, Prabhupada's going to be he's so glad to see me in the past. Now I'm his disciple. He's going to be even happier to see me. He's going to be so happy to see me. Look, I'm Brahmatirtha now. As I walk up, I'm so proud as I go up to get the cookie. And Prabhupada looks at me as if I'm a total piece of glass, that I didn't exist. I was the clearest glass you can see. And as if he looked right through me and I was totally invisible. So the point I'm trying to make is that pride comes before the fall. So soon when I was very proud, that's what happened to me. And fortunately, I got to see Prabhupada again with a lot less pride during that time at the Bhaktivedanta Institute conference. But this verse is relating to pride. This verse is telling us, don't be proud. Any of us can slip on a banana peel every day. Be there if somebody slips to help them stand up. And don't be proud, because any devotional service we do lasts. Just like that devotee, when I first saw Prabhupada in November 1971 at the Calcutta Temple, and the devotee who was about to leave the movement, Prabhupada understood that he had done a huge amount of devotional service and nothing was lost, and don't make life more difficult for him. So my lesson from this particular verse is 930, is how important it is for us to show each other gratitude and love, because without that, we don't have any kind of movement. We're just as bad as all the politicians who are fighting with each other day in and day out. So with that, I'll stop here and answer any questions. Thank you very much. Hope I didn't talk too long. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you so much for sharing those special moments that you've had with Srila Prabhupada. Just going to spotlight my video. It's been very enlivening, particularly to see that mystical aspect that you were so privileged to experience with Srila Prabhupada. And there is a question, before we put the questions, there's 2 questions that have come through. And before I pose those questions to you, Prabhu, I just want to put out the competition question so that our viewers could start formulating their answers. It's a very, very simple question if you've been listening carefully to what Brahmatirtha Prabhu had to say. And we are looking for just a specific word. So the question is, when Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who's our speaker tonight, told Srila Prabhupada that he had to leave, what did Prabhupada say to him? The one word. We're looking for the one specific word. Don't shout out the answers. The chat box is right at the bottom of your screen. Send your answer to the host, please. And after we've posed questions to Prabhu, we'll see who was the correct, who gave us the correct answer, and we'll just announce that and give the prize away at that stage. So now I'd like to turn back to Brahmatirtha Prabhu, and the first question that we have is that, sorry, let me just get the question here, is there are so many processes out there. How do you know you've chosen the right path?
That's a nice, the question, how do I know I chose the right path? That's a really good question. And that was why I went to India. How do I know it's legitimate? The only way I could find out if the Hare Krishna movement was legitimate, I felt, was to go to its source. Well, there is a system of governance in America, in most countries of the world have it now, in which we have a balance of government. We have the judiciary, an executive, and a legislative body. In America, it's our Congress. I think in South Africa, it's your parliament. But we have a system of checks and balances. Similarly, the Vedic literature is so brilliant. It has a built-in system of checks and balances called Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. So it has a way of internally verifying its own truth. Just like in democracy, we try to have an internal system to try to make it work, of the tricameral system, legislature and executive and judicial. It doesn't always work well, but the Vedic system works very well. So that's one piece of evidence. Another piece of evidence is our own experience. I'm by the University of Florida, where we have a Krishna house, and we serve out in non-COVID times 1,000 plates of prasadam every day on campus. Been doing this since 1972. It was a very popular program. The campus even named where we serve out Krishna Lunch Lane. And so a lot of students come to our Krishna house, and I give them a challenge. The mascot for the football team is an alligator. So the team is known as the Gators. I don't find an alligator a particularly attractive mascot, but that's okay. So when students come, I give them this challenge. I say, I want you to chant Hare Krishna 5 minutes a day for 1 week, no longer. The Maha Mantra, here's a mantra card, 5 minutes a day, but no longer. And that's 1 week. And the other week, I want you to chant Go Gators, Go Gators. That's their cheer for 5 minutes, no longer for 1 week. But you have to do 5 minutes. I've never met anybody who's able to chant Hare Krishna for just 5 minutes. By the end of the week, they're chanting longer. And I've never met anybody who could chant Go Gators for 5 minutes, even for 5 minutes for 7 days, because the mantra has potency. So part of the proof is your own internal compass. Boy, this works. It changes my consciousness. Dear Govinda Prabhu did a master's thesis at Florida State University, in which he developed a psychological profiling system based on the modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the thesis was very well received, just like we have Meyer-Briggs and Enneagram and other profiling systems. He developed one based on the modes of nature. Then for his PhD, which has been published in reputable journals, he then got a population and of people who didn't know anything about Krishna. Sadly, nowadays, that's a lot easier to do than it used to be. But he found a population that never heard of the Krishna movement, and he would give half of the volunteers, they'd get paid a little something. He'd have them chant a 16-syllable nonsense mantra. The other half would chant Hari. The other chant would chant Hare Krishna. And then before they did the chanting, he'd measure their modes of nature. Where are they on this continuum from ignorance to passion to goodness? And then after they chanted for 1 month, he would measure where are they in this continuum. And there was a statistically significant shift in the modes of nature towards goodness. And this exercise, now a physician devotee in Denver has repeated this. It's been repeated in various places around the world to show that when people chant the Maha Mantra, there's scientifically a shift in their modes of nature that does not occur if they chant a 16-syllable nonsense mantra. So we can judge it in our own, just like if I give you some sweet rice, you know you're not hungry afterwards. I can't judge if you're hungry or not, only you can, but you know you're not. Similarly, we can taste the mantra ourselves. We can study it in scientific literature. We can look at Guru Shastra Sadhu, the checks and balance system that's built in. Does what the scriptures say agree with what the Guru says, agree with the great sadhus have said? So we have many ways of distinguishing ourselves from something that may be an odd cult or a made-up religion or something not bona fide. Now, I want to make the point, it doesn't mean that other paths, when Prabhupada would meet Christians, he wouldn't try to, at times, convince them not to be Christians, because that's where their faith was, their culture. So he says, here's how you be a good Christian. You don't kill animals unnecessarily. You chant God's names. It doesn't have to be the name Krishna in particular. Okay, that's I can let me stop there so I don't spend all our time on one question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for that brilliant answer. It was so well encapsulated in terms of the various ways that you've explained it in depth and yet so practically as well. Before I pose the second question to you, I'd just like to announce our winner, because we don't want our winner to leave without giving us their details tonight. And the winner of the competition, the first correct answer that we received was from Divya Mishra. She sent me a message and her answer was correct. And the answer to that was when Brahmatirtha Prabhu said to Srila Prabhupada that he needs to leave, Prabhupada said to him, you need to live. So she gave me the correct answer. So I'd like to request her. Oh, there's an applause from Prabhu himself. Yeah. I'd like to request her to please send me her details or send it to the host directly. We're looking for your contact number and an email address, please. So if you just private message that as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to put the second question to Prabhu. And the question is, how does one choose a spiritual master?
That is another really good question. Well, um, um, it's there's not one magical method. One should examine the spiritual master before initiation. Afterwards, one should follow the spiritual master. So you want to make sure that this is someone who I could give my heart to. Now in ISKCON, we fortunately, everyone who joins ISKCON automatically gets 3 spiritual masters. Bhakti True Swami gave a brilliant talk on this a few months before he left. It was so brilliant. Fortunately, I got to tell him so. It was really good. And we have 3. You have your initiating guru, who one, I have faith. This is someone who I can give my heart to. And the second one is your Shiksha guru. That's the mentors we have who guide us. I have my mentors who guide me. I still do to this day. I have to. I mean, sometimes it's mutual. Sometimes my mentors call me up for advice. I call them for advice, but they're still mentors. And that's like a Shiksha guru. And then we have our founder Acharya, who is everyone's guru in ISKCON, Prabhupada. He's the founder Acharya. That's what it means, founder Acharya. In the Upadeshamrita, the 5th chapter, Rupa Goswami says very clearly, not the Upadeshamrita, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I meant to say. He says very clearly that one should follow the guru in the footsteps of the great acharyas. The great acharyas are people like Prabhupada or his guru or Bhaktivinoda Thakur or in that special category. So when you join ISKCON, you always get 3 gurus. And sometimes your primary guru, who might be your Shiksha, it may be your Diksha. Sometimes it may end up being just your relationship with Prabhupada. Doesn't mean everyone needs a living guru. There's some people have this deviant philosophy, a living guru is not required. That's not how the Vedic system works. Yet the Vedic system does have different kinds of living gurus, Diksha, Shiksha, and then and we all have the shelter of the Vani, the instructions of the founder Acharya. So how do you find a guru? You search and you go in front of the deities and say, I think I'm ready for a guru. Who would be good for me? Krishna will send you the guru. We always pray Yasha Prasadat, Bhagavat Prasado. By the mercy of Krishna, you get the guru, and by the mercy of the guru, you get Krishna. So when you're really serious about it, it'll become obvious. And if you need help with it, there's so many senior people around who can guide anybody in this process. I'm glad to help anybody I can myself in that. And this is not a paid political an advertising, because I'm not a guru. I have elected. That's a service that's over and above. It's above my pay grade.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. And I know that many of our viewers have had very positive feedback. I know even amongst ourselves, as the organizers of this Gita Week program, there's lots of wonderful comments that have come through, expressing appreciation, for your wonderful talk. And like to say thank you to you for sharing your time with us, and particularly your memories with Srila Prabhupada, which we very much appreciate. It's very inspiring. And I see there's a message that's come up from Bhavta Nathu, which says, thank you for the mystical lesson. And of course,
yeah,
it's been wonderful having you, and I hope that we'd be able to have you once again. And it's wonderful engaging with you, like I said to you in my email inviting you onto this program, other than dealing with conflict resolution on platforms like this, where we get to hear nectarian pastimes and to hear about the glories of Srila Prabhupada, as well as from Bhagavad Gita itself. So I'd just like to remind our viewers that tomorrow we have another very special person, devotee, all the way from your neighborhood, Prabhu. We have Guru Garanga Prabhu, who is also from Gainesville,
Yeah,
who'll be
my
joining
neighbor.
us. Sorry?
Yeah, my neighbor
Yes.
and friend.
Yes. So when I was getting a bit anxious this evening as to whether, with the time difference, etc., whether Brahmatirtha Prabhu was going to be online timeously, I actually got hold of Guru Garanga Prabhu to give me his number to just touch base with him and make sure that
Oh,
he's going to be on.
I
with
wouldn't
us.
be late. I do apologize, but I was aware of time. I have lunch with the chief of police every other Friday. I'm an advisor to him, and today was our day to meet. So, but I told him I have to be at my desk at 1:30, and I zipped back. But sorry about to put you in anxiety.
Not a problem whatsoever, Prabhu. You just reinforced how important a personality you are with the chief of police, and here you are sharing your time with us. So I think we've been very fortunate and graced with your presence. We look forward to having Guru Garanga Prabhu tomorrow. He's an attorney by profession. He's also a Prabhupada disciple, temple president in Switzerland in the early days of his engagement in ISKCON as well. So we're very blessed to have the association of such senior devotees. And once again, on behalf of all our viewers, the organizers of the event, the management of Sri Sri Radharadhana Temple, I'd like to extend a very special thank you to you, Prabhu. Thank you to our guests who have joined us this evening on Facebook as well as on Zoom. And special thank you to our tech team with Amrita Mani, with Surabi Kunj and Priya Kishori, to Krishangi Radhe and to Indulekha as well for assisting with the program presentation and those that are playing the roles in the background of this event as well. Thank you very much, Prabhu, and we look forward to seeing you again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.